invitation to a friend. Join my party at the end. Those who love me can take the train. I've seen fire, I've seen rain. We got poison in the blood. Kiss me now before the flood. And if like me, you're laughing at the guillotine. If like me, you love the smell of gasoline. Let's just burn it down for all the world to see. If it's never said, it never has to be. That I got one thing left to hide, like a thorn deep in my side. The day we started was too late. No tourniquet will twist this fate. I slept on a cyclone trail. Devastation doomed to fail. Bear and forbear all you can. Kiss goodnight the race you ran. And if like me, you're laughing at the guillotine. If like me, you love the smell of gasoline. Let's just burn it down for all the world to see. If it's never said, it never has to be. Just burn it down for all the world to see. If it's never said, it never has to be.
Hello, and welcome back to Podcast with a K. I'm your host, Carla with a K. And we are back for another fine, whatever evening you're listening to this on, or maybe it's morning, whether it's on WECS 90.1 FM, twitch.tv/CarlyGirl, or YouTube or Spotify, or wherever it is that you get your shows. We're everywhere, including on all social medias. So feel free to weigh in at any given time in the comments, in the messages, or in the live stream. You can even call in if you really want to, but I might not pick up. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, welcome back to another fantastic week. I told y'all we would bring guests and interviews back, and of course, what better way to do it than with someone who came highly, highly recommended. We are joined here by the one, the only, Eric Harrison.
Hello, Carly. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Welcome. You have a very unique blend of activities in your life, so before I go and speak for you, let us know a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Well, I'm a failed musician who continues at age 57 to keep trying, because I think that smash hit is right around the corner. And to pay my bills and feed my family, I'm a trial attorney here in the swamps of New Jersey. And during my 32nd year of a legal career as a trial lawyer, which I really love. I also love songwriting. I love recording music. I love playing out with my band. I'm getting better and better as I age. The world cares less and less, but I care less and less that the world cares less and less. So I'm having a really great time. I have a new album I'm really proud of, and appreciative of the chance to talk about it, and for anybody who might be willing to listen to it.
Well, let me go ahead and start by saying I don't think you can ever be a failed anything if you continue to do it, because it's not over yet. So that's, undecided. undetermined. You only
True.
fail once you've given up. And that's
aspiring, yearning, and grabbing at the brass ring.
There you go. And you can always aspire to anything at any age. They like to tell you a lot that, Morgan Freeman was a grown man before he really made it in his acting career, and he got to play God. So I feel like there's always a chance. But
I like his approach. I named my first daughter Eve.
Oh, and there you go.
I mean, the wife really liked that name, and I liked the side benefit of the fact of Eve's father actually being God. So,
in a sense, you're God.
You do the math. You do the math.
See, and that's the attitude we got to keep.
me and Morgan Freeman, we have so much in common.
I think you're cut from the same cloth, honestly. But on the topic of your new album, we are going to get into so much. We started off, actually, before we started talking, by listening to the very first song, Laughing at the Guillotine.
I like how you pronounce that.
Which part? Guillotine?
Like an English major. out here in the swamps of Jersey, it's a guillotine. Not that we use the word quite very often.
Yeah, I can't imagine it comes up in casual conversation.
Ça c'est la guillotine.
I think that's how you have to promote it. You have to be like, hey guys, I'm Eric Harrison and here's my new song.
How do you say, I think in French, to laugh is riser, R-I-S-E-R?
I believe so.
So say riser à la guillotine.
There we go.
If I ever get a gig in Paris and they don't laugh me out of town, then I'll certainly try that.
It has to happen. I think they might actually invite you back if you do it that way.
Yeah, why not? Stupid, loud American to have a few more laughs.
I mean, listen, whatever pays the bills, right?
Absolutely.
But tell us about this, because I listened to the album, or I listened through the album in preparation for this conversation, and you have a cool element that I personally admire, because I feel like more songs need to be told in the form of a story. I love a good storytelling song, and I feel like it's so rare, especially in modern music. Modern music is very much like, here's a feeling that I had and here's a chorus about it, right? But I feel like somewhere in the 80s we started losing songs about things and about stories. And your album kind of carries through that. Although, Laughing at the Guillotine, I don't know if this is a story or a notion. So let's start with Laughing at the Guillotine and then we'll expand.
So that song was a natural to lead off the album. I was listening to one of my favorite bands of the 80s and 90s is The Replacements, and Paul Westerberg made some good solo records after The Replacements exploded, and I really like his stripped down approach. He's a great writer who really embodies the spirit of rock and roll. I don't purport to be like as legitimate a rock and roller as Paul, but I wanted to follow his kind of model, the stripped down approach. And this is going to sound very pretentious, but I was reading, and I continue to read a lot of the great Stoic writers like Marcus Aurelius, and it's part of my midlife crisis phase as a songwriter where I've lost some friends, I've lost some family. I mean, that's a natural thing with aging. You're going to lose some people along the way. And with the craziness that our lives have been through, and I have two daughters who are 22 and 19 now, and just the world is so much more complicated and challenging than it was when I was their age. And the overall sense of remembering, like, this life's going to be over in a nonce anyway, so like, let's just laugh at the guillotine, because if that blade is going to fall, and at least have as good a time and be as good to people as you can be before you're done. And it's a very hippie-ish, simplistic vibe, but it was also based on, there's a movie in the late 80s or maybe 90s. It was called Those Who Love Me Can Take the Train, a really pretentious foreign film about a guy who plans his own funeral in advance, and people from various forms of his life have to travel to this remote town where he had lived. And so that made it into the opening lyrics. Those who love me can take the train. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. We got poison in the blood. Kiss me now before the flood, because who the hell knows what's coming next. So it's sort of a mission statement to set the tone for the album.
I think that carries super well, and I never even thought that could be a reference, but that is really cool. I do enjoy seeing artists kind of bridge the gap between different art forms. So walk me through this album, because like I said, there's a element of storytelling that I quite enjoyed through different songs. And, you know, the thought process that I had was, you know, are these real stories? Are these made up for the sake of telling a story through an album? Are these songs all relevant to each other, or are they, you know, is this an anthology of music?
No, that's really kind for you to give it that deep a thought. You know, when I make albums, it's really my process is, if I'll collect a few, and once I have one I'm really excited about, I think, all right, let's rally around this one and wait for some more good songs to come out and see if they fit well. Certainly it's very old-fashioned thinking to talk about an album and themes, because really most people don't listen to albums at a time anymore. But to me, it all came together kind of naturally, and I didn't really have to force it, because I'm at a certain stage in life and I'm seeing things in certain ways. And for me, it's important to have good pacing on a record. I don't want all the songs to be in the same tempo. I don't want all the instrumentation to be the same. I want some variety to occur naturally without having to force it. But, you know, some of these songs were ideas I had kicking around in my head for a long time, like Dominique number 2. I wanted to, there's a great story by John Updike called The Persistence of Desire, which I had read back when I used to have more time in my life to read literature. And that short story really stuck with me. And I wanted to sort of update it to through like a Leonard Cohen lens of a failed fling that was half passionate, but ultimately unsatisfying, and how the two participants in it would get on with their lives. Had nothing to do with me whatsoever, completely imagination. And I guess Bleecker Street is sort of an update on an older song of mine, which kind of did have to do a little bit with me. On my last record, I had a song called Astor Place, about a young couple in their early 20s trying to figure out their place in the world. And I remember that feeling right out of college, thinking, you know, do I sell out, or do I pursue my bliss? When you're younger, you think more in terms of one versus the other. You don't see shades of gray. And so that was one of my better songs ever. And I wanted to take that couple and follow them a little further and see where things might end up. So they went from Astor Place to Bleecker Street. And certainly I was channeling thoughts that I had back then during that stage of my life, because a lot of the stuff you do when you're a songwriter, no matter how long you're doing it, it's forged when you're trying to figure out who you are. And so there was a little bit of autobiography to that. And some other stuff, like Love You Less, is just a direct love song, really simple, no real metaphor there. And the rockers were particularly fun. I always want to have a little fun. So Sal's Place, I think, might have been the first song on the record I wrote. And that's kind of autobiographical, because as a guy who does music only as a hobby, I feel like I have a bit of imposter syndrome, even though I know objectively I'm really good at what I do. I make good music. I feel a little bit less legitimate because I'm getting up at 5:30 every day, and I'm a working stiff, and I'm not that dangerous musician riding around in a broken down van and hoping he can make $20 at the next gig. I mean, I'm not particularly wealthy, but I'm not giving my life to music, you know? So sometimes I feel like maybe I'm not the real thing, but but I have met along the years so many people who are into music for the right reasons. And the older I get, the more I meet. And people who say, like, I do this because I have to. Like it's just in me. And I feel like there's a camaraderie there that's even greater than when we were in our 20s and 30s. I think we were more there was more professional jealousy. Like I would look at the success of someone and think, oh, that he's occupying my space. Like that, like somebody else's success, that's not failure for you. It's just somebody else's success. It's not like
Right.
there's a limited number of ears out there to listen to your art. And I find that the older we get, the more magnanimity there is, the more sharing and support that there is, at least among most of the people I know who do music. So I wanted to capture that place, and that's this fictitious place, Sal's place, where all these rockers go to lick their wounds, even though they're, by any conventional definition, they're wasting their time.
Right. You know, that's interesting. I've had the topic of imposter syndrome come up a lot this week, so I wonder what in the universe is making all of us kind of dwell on this. Maybe it's just the start of a new year and the second month of said new year. But it's funny. I know a couple of other people that I've spoken to, some in music, some in art, in different corners of their own lives. Like, there's the balance of, like, here's what I need to do to get by tomorrow, but here's what I need to do to get by, like, with myself for my life. And so I feel like, I have a degree of this too, right? The difference being there that, I'm not necessarily pursuing something that I have to do in order to make money. I very much fight I fight very hard to be able to keep my life in the creative field, but if I have to work a normal job to make money to be able to fund the passion project, then I'll do it, right? And there's people who I know who refuse to do it. They don't want to do it. They don't want to work a real job. This is their craft and this is what they're going to dedicate their life to, and that's it. And in a way that is inspiring, right? It's raw. It's very driven, it's very ambitious. And I see those people and I'm like, man, I wish I had what it takes to do that. But then I talk to other people similar to you who they'll have the day job, right? They have the 9 to 5 and they live well because of it. And then it's like, oh, hey, you want to do something after this? Oh, no, I can't. I got rehearsal. Oh, no, I got a show. It's like, wait, what? On top of what you already did all day? And so I kind of want to bounce that question back to you. If you didn't have, you mentioned you have, a family and kids. If you were a lone wolf, do you think you would have thrown yourself fully into music? Or do you think you have this balance kind of as a deliberate decision in your life to have the 9 to 5 and the passion project?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm lucky. I have passion for my 9 to 5 work. I really like being a lawyer. There was no like fork in the road where I said, oh, if you want to have a family, you got to do this. Whereas if you're willing to go for it and be on the road and go for music, I would get bored if I only did music. And to be quite candid, I mean, I'm really good at what I do, but I'm not that good that the world needs me to suffer for my art. And like, I'm a pretty limited guitar player, for example. Every once in a while, I'll see somebody I admire, and for like the 3 or 4 hours after the gig, I'll think, I really got to step up my game with my guitar playing. It would, like, there's this guy I adore named Mike Viola, brilliant songwriter, and I've gotten to see him up close, and he has such command of the guitar, both acoustically and electrically. This is a world-class musician and songwriter. And I think to myself, man, my songs would be more interesting if I had more chord variations and if I really steep myself in different influences. And that'll last a few hours. And then I'll think, you know what? Write your 3-chord songs and you'll work with other people to add some variety down the road. It's still speaking what you're about. So the people who go for it in music and do it exclusively are the people who say to me, like, I do this because I have to, not because I'm trying to prove a point. And I have enormous admiration for them. At the same time, there's some people who think, all right, this was more of the way of thinking in the 90s when the music industry was more of a thing, was more monolithic. People would be like, all right, I'm throwing 5 years into this and it doesn't happen for me, then I'm moving on. And that's a different kind of definition of success. So when I start off our conversation by saying I'm a failed musician, I'm a failed musician by conventional measures, by the things that like mom and dad would think when they're asking, so what are you going to do with this, And,
Right.
but I stopped caring about that a long time ago. One of the benefits of aging is that you just let it go and you hang on to what you love, regardless of how it's received.
Well, that's reassuring to hear, I suppose. But I do understand the I guess desire to kind of see that metric of success, right? Because when you're a lawyer, you're succeeding because you're winning your cases, right? You have a connection to baseball here, which we'll talk about later. You're successful because you're winning, because you're making money, because you're getting ads, because you're getting sponsorships. In music, it's a little bit, and in any creative field really, it's a little bit harder to gauge that unless you're at big awards shows every year. The Grammys just happened, but I know so many musicians who make a living doing music, and they're nowhere in the sphere of being invited to participate, to attend, or to even be a part of Grammys week. But that's not to say that they're not in the rooms where those songs are being written, where those things are happening, on the stages where those same artists are touring. And so it's interesting to me how different people, I guess, define success. And given that you have given less thought to those like conventional methods of measuring success, how do you see success in something? Is it that people like what you're doing? Because you have a good amount of listens on Spotify, which is only one platform that I checked. But how do you personally measure success in creativity?
I've had different definitions over the course of my life, but right now it's the simplest ever. If I record something that I find myself wanting to listen to, I've succeeded. And so, it is definitely nice to see a few thousand streams on Spotify for something I put out, and to hear from people that I don't know who like it. And like during COVID, I did little shows from my front porch on Facebook, and that's the only thing that got me into social media. I'm not a digital native by any stretch, but meeting people from all over the world who started tuning in every Sunday and forging connections. There's a guy in Finland who covered one of my songs at a church, and he sent me a video of it. It was so moving and so sweet. And like, there's a little bit of magic to that. And that definitely makes you feel good. But really, it's it's sort of convenient to say it, but I really do feel it. Like on one album before this one, my album was No Defenses, I put out in 2023. There's only one song on that album that I never have a hankering for. So that means 13/14 of that album was a smashing success. And that one song, I get what I was going for. It just fell a little flat. But I've also had other people tell me that's their favorite song on the record. So that's fine. But like this new album, I took my time. I did it really slowly. And I put the songs in a sequence that made sense to me. I decided what's on side 1 and side 2, which is somewhat laughable because, unless you're a vinyl fan,
right.
Nobody thinks like too. But to me, I'm always trying to recreate the albums that I used to take out of my local library and ride home and put on my turntable and then put on a cassette so I could listen to them on my Walkman. And so like, that's when I fell in love with music. So I'm always trying to reproduce that template, just like a young person now, like, people who worship Kanye, trying to emulate what he did on his first few records. Like, that's no less legitimate than what I'm doing. It's just a different frame of reference because of when they fell in love with the music they love.
That's an amazing point, and I'm definitely going to bookmark this conversation for later because that's all such a rich perspective on that. I definitely like what you said about the difference in your approach to not being a digital native and seeing someone globally still find a way to make that connection to you. I think that's one of the cool pros, definitely, of social media with its unendingly expanding list of cons nowadays. But it's definitely I think, a cool feeling. You know, you've gone international, you've gone global. I think that in and of itself is a good mark of success. Digital world tour is here.
Thinking locally, acting globally, right?
Exactly. But you did mention, for example, Mark Viola. Do you have inspirations in your sound and in your writing that you yourself try to emulate?
Well, a few people are such strong influences on me that I've been trying not to emulate them, and I have thankfully failed. I mean, the most obvious voice similarity to mine is that of Elvis Costello, who's one of my first heroes, and by any objective measure, I sound like Elvis. And when I was a young man, that annoyed me because I didn't want to be pigeonholed as just an Elvis Costello sound alike. Mm-hmm. And of course, Bob Dylan it created the template for the type of music that I do. I wouldn't say that I sing like Mr. Dylan, but it's the paradigm. And I try, I'm a conventional writer. Like any musician would tell you, like musically, what I do is nothing new. It's derivative and not in a negative sense. I mean, Tom Petty's derivative, and he's one of my heroes. Yeah. Bruce Springsteen is largely derivative. He's another one of my heroes. I'm not really pushing any boundaries, but sometimes I will consciously try to make something that sounds like an artist I love. Like I mentioned, Laughing at the Guillotine is pure an effort to be Paul Westerberg. Sal's Place channels in the Rolling Stones and the Replacements. My song Diner, about the importance of diners in my life. It's a sort of talking folk song. It steals a melody partially from Dead Flowers by the Rolling Stones. There's a little bit of Poncho and Lefty by Townes Van Zandt. So, sometimes I'll realize what I'm ripping off while I'm doing it.
Yeah.
As long as I make it a little different and add a little flair to it, I'm okay with that.
It's, and sampling is such a huge part of the music industry anyway. So, you either have that being like the most clear, obvious measure of like, I took this because I liked it, versus I think what you do, which is taking an inspiration and putting your own twist on it. Because as I was listening through it, maybe it's the Jersey. There is a little bit of Bruce Springsteen, which I know you have a song about, but there is a little bit of that. There's a little bit of John Mellencamp. There's a little bit of that generation of music in general, which I think is really cool because it peeks through. And, some of it is the artist that you named, and some of it is other artists who were at their peak in that same time frame, which have also inspired other artists. Right now, there's a huge resurgence and revival of 80s style synth pop specifically, and folk music as well as you mentioned vinyls. I personally have been buying brand new vinyls recently. I'm definitely the type that I would go to thrift stores and find the vinyls of like my dad's favorite music because that's what I grew up listening to. But nowadays, an artist that I like modernly will put out a record and, I'll be like, all right, I guess I need that too. Of course, I'm already streaming it, right? But I'm not going to go buy a CD. I'm going to go buy the actual vinyl. And now that's something to have.
Yeah, there's a certain feeling that that one would get buying a record that one greatly anticipated back in the day, and just using your thumbnail to break the seal and smelling the vinyl and reading the liner notes. This is not going to make me sound cool at all, but I loved Duran Duran back in the day.
Yeah.
And in addition to being a like Bob Dylan worshiping folkie, I fell for a lot of synth pop. I loved Depeche Mode and The Cure, and Duran Duran had a freshness about them that was somewhat Beatlesque. And the first records I ever got, my grandparents got me the red and the blue Beatles records, which were greatest hits from like 60 to 64 and 65 to 69 or whatever. And Duran Duran, even though their lyrics were nonsensical and there was very little substance to their music, they had great melodies, and they had a fresh sound. And I remember buying the album Seven and the Ragged Tiger, which had some really good songs on it. But I remember reading like they spent about $150,000 recording the record and about like $600,000 shooting the album cover. Because this was the 80s. It was the era of excess. And I remember thinking, I would take just $10,000 and I could make a pretty good album myself. But I remember that thrill and riding my bike over to my friend's house and cracking it open and smelling it and reading it and looking at the photos and putting on the second song was one where Simon is trying to sing like David Bowie. New Moon on Monday is the song. And I'm thinking, wow, this sounds like Bowie. He's not saying much of anything. He's not deep like Bowie, but we can pretend. And the
Bowie
thrill,
on his day off.
yeah, Bowie like talking in his sleep and waking up and saying, no, we shan't make a record out of that. But Simon would turn it into art. I don't even know what the opening question was. Oh yeah, it's vinyl, I guess, right?
Yes.
The thrill of that experience. Yeah, it's something I'll always be chasing.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I think there's kind of a desire for connection right now, and I think that's in part what is causing this kind of revival of I guess older media. I think that the new media scene happened very quickly, and we very much are kind of looking back with so much nostalgia, which is great because it brings this back. You mentioned Duran Duran, which is really funny. I knew of their existence, but I didn't really give them a second thought growing up. And then a few years ago, they toured with a modern band known for their digital music and digital harmonizing, Bastille. Bastille opened for Duran Duran on their US tour. And so suddenly, here I am, a fresh baby 20-something, listening to Duran Duran for the first time with all of the excitement of someone who would have listened to them in their original glory days just because they toured with my actively favorite band, Bastille. And it was a very cool, surreal experience, and one that I was like conscious of, right? I've gone to concerts for artists across all genres, and it's always a great experience. But I went to a concert for, I think Mother's Day or Father's Day. I bought my family all tickets to go see Luis Miguel, who is a huge Mexican singer. I don't know if he's actually Mexican. He sings in Spanish, but he's this huge artist. That I grew up hearing in my house, and seeing an artist like that with my parents was such a cool, generationally impactful experience because I'm seeing them sing songs from their youth, and now I'm singing them because they're from my youth too.
A funny story about that.
Of course.
I took my friend. So I have a friend who's about, I met her when she was 12. She's 37 today. Holy shit. And so when she was a little kid, I took her to see a triple bill of Destiny's Child, who, was Beyonce's first girl group, Christina Aguilera, and the opening band was a Canadian boy band who played their own instruments. So I guess you don't call them a boy band, but they never really broke through, but they, and the place was full of like teens and tweens with glitter and crop tops and whatever, and old men like me, and which kind of sounds gross, but it really was very sweet and like dads and their kids. And for the last song of the Canadian boy band, they said, we want to play a great song by one of our favorite old Canadian artists. And they launched into Summer of '69 by Brian Adams. And every dad in that place got up out of his seat. My first one. The dads I was high-fiving people I didn't know. We were singing along. And this little shit looks up at me. I'm impressed. You know so much old music.
Oh my God.
You are walking home on the Parkway, little girl. You got on it. But like what you were saying about the generational thing, like seeing Bastille open for Duran Duran, every generation has stories like this. I got to see Green Day open for the Ramones.
Wow.
And what could be a more beautiful passing of the torch? I mean, the Ramones were bitter as hell because they never realized the huge commercial success that the bands who used their formula realized, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, great music is great music. I don't care how bitter you are. And to see the generations, like, there's that common core there. And anytime you hear a good song now, like my kids into Noah Kahn and Role Model and like even the girl pop like Sabrina Carpenter, all of these young artists incorporate a lot of stuff from the music that I love. And I might ultimately not be all in on it because there might be something about it that's just not of my generation.
It's
but
unrelatable.
At sometimes like words like fire
Yeah.
in a lyric,
right.
I just can't get there. Or the phrase, if I'm being honest, you know, your generation uses that expression a lot. I'm just not feeling it. But again, that doesn't make it less legitimate. It just means that I'm an old guy with different tastes.
And you know what? It's funny. I'm kind of starting to see that just in these days as well. Like I feel like I'm a little bit beyond the era of being a digital native, but it definitely came to be in my time, right? Like I feel like the first big artist that I knew that made it online was Justin Bieber in 2009, right? And so that was like the first artist that I found online. That was the artist that I was like obsessed with for years and years and years and years.
You had Bieber fever.
I had Bieber fever. That's it. And so after that, every artist that made it online was like, oh, it's the new Justin Bieber. Oh, it's the new Justin Bieber. And I'd be like, oh, cool. Completely different genre, completely different style. And I was like, well, now they're just chasing a look, right? They're chasing a formula without any of the actual like elements of what made that artist big. And seeing that kind of happen now is interesting because, for example, Green Day is a good example. I got to see Green Day with Fall Out Boy and Weezer, and that was kind of surreal because they're all like greats in their field, but I would never have listened to them together. And they had a smaller, like newer, like punk ska band called The Interrupters with them, who I discovered whenever I originally had my radio show because they sent in a song to the college's radio station. And I was like, it's so weird and so cool to see so many worlds collide, even just under the umbrella of rock. But they all played their songs, and they all had a song that sounded like one of the other bands. And so after that, my friend and I looked like, you know, when did these songs come out? Did they write them in the same time? And it really does seem like the four of them just grabbed inspiration from each other. So I wanted to ask, with your music, whenever you do, because you said that there's some artists that you deliberately try to not sound like because you emulate so much of them, what is it that you think gives your music its own kind of unique twist? Like, what sets you apart? How do you actually go about doing that practically, but also with the general vibe, to use a modern word?
I think I'm a good lyric writer. That doesn't, but I'm not all that unique. I think if you listen to what I think I'm a very good self-editor. So there are very few songs that I've put out in the last 20 years that I listen back to and cringe over the lyrics. I wouldn't say that makes me stand out because I mean, there's a pretty significant chunk of the listening public that really doesn't give a hoot about lyrics. You have to have a good melody. You have to have a hook. There has to be something interesting going on there. I think I've been lucky enough in the last 10 years to work with Kevin Salem as my producer, and Kevin's a little older than I am, but we have the same music sensibilities, and so we communicate with each other really well, and he helps bring to fruition what I need. Like on my last album, No Defense is the title track. I said, you know, I want it to be produced like Blonde on Blonde era Bob Dylan. I want it to sound like Dr. John and Tom Waits met up at a rest stop and spent the night drinking and found themselves in a barn with a reel-to-reel and a country band, and let's just see what happened. And he totally got it, you know, and that's not a conversation I could have with a lot of people. But nothing particularly sets me apart. I think I'm good because I'm a good lyric writer, and I serve the song, you know, like my instrumentation will always be in service of getting the song across. I won't try to do anything too flashy unless it's called for.
I do think that is in and of itself a very valid thing that makes your songs unique. Like I said, the thing that I picked up on the most listening through the album was just the fact that there's a story. And that's something that, like I said, I miss a lot in music. It's very, very kind of like diamond in the rough to find songs like that written in any genre.
Although, I mean, Taylor does it a lot.
Yeah.
The thing with Taylor's stories, though, is like they're so, I mean, I have a Swiftie in my family, so it's so overanalyzed that like sometimes I can have difficulty just enjoying listening to it, especially since if the person next to me is hitting pause every 20 seconds to talk about which ex-boyfriend that song is about,
right.
or whatever. But like, listen to her, the first song on that song, Ophelia, I mean, that's one of the greatest sounding pop songs I think maybe I've heard in my life. And all the Swifties like piled on saying the album sucked, and I don't know where everybody's at on it now, but like a great sounding record is a great sounding record. It doesn't matter where it came from, and it's really fantastic.
Yeah, that is actually a great point. I have not discussed much Taylor Swift on the podcast in general. I don't feel like I have a lot of Swifties come through here, but I have a friend who is like the number one Swiftie. I feel like if she could change her entire identity,
I am.
She would.
That's the thing about Swiftie. They're a little bit like Springsteen fans from New Jersey. Everybody's in a competition to be like, oh yeah. Well, I saw her when there were only 3 people there.
Right. I don't know. I feel like the girl that I know might actually give them a run for their money. But I feel like in your new album, a lot of the songs are kind of anecdotal, but they always seem to have a general feeling of kind of what we've discussed, which is of why you do music. There's kind of an element of maybe of glorifying like just the mundane in the everyday. For example, I think in Accidental Poetry, that's one of my kind of favorite feelings that kind of moves throughout the song. It's like, you know, it's the feeling of like, oh, I stumbled upon something cool.
Thank you for mentioning that song. Yeah, I think if I had to pick one from the record to play for somebody, I'd probably go with that one, because it's one of my better melodies, and saying I've been around enough to see all the best things in life cost money. I'm really proud of that line.
I heard that line and I immediately saved it to like my personal like main listening to playlist. It's a good one.
Yeah, I'm proud of that one. And yes, Accidental Poetry, like if you remain open, like I just had a pretty grueling trial where I got my butt kicked, and I worked really hard. I did a really good job. I think my client did really well, but you know, the jury just wasn't buying what we were selling. And the end result was not what we wanted. But in the course of it, and I was sleeping like 3 or 4 hours a night, I met some really great people. There was a diner where I prepped every morning from 5:30 till 7:30, and some of the wait staff there were, you know, we became friendly, and I was bouncing ideas off of them about what to do when I get to court. And like, I was savoring that, even though it wasn't directly a part of the experience. And that's the sort of accidental poetry that you can be open to, just fortuitously in meeting someone or having an experience that if you weren't open to it, and if you had your blinders on and you were just full steam ahead on what your particular objective is at the moment, you might miss something that really enriches your life.
This is what I'm talking about. That mentality does make its way in the songs, and I think it does kind of peek through. I'm a fan of it. So let's take a quick little break as we kind of wind down for the episode, and we'll listen to Accidental Poetry so people can understand the impact of what we're talking about here.
All right, fire it up.
Crouched at the starting gate for the whole damn world to see, like accidental poetry. a guppy in her castle moat. If that's all I'll ever be, it's accidental poetry. I want so much more than I can touch. Though what I can touch would be a splendid start. All we've never said won't matter much when we spill out the glory in our hearts. Take my hand, I come in peace, said the provocateur to the provocatrice. What a lovely team we'd be, like accidental poetry. Search for words to say to her. I'm a monkey at a typewriter until I win the love of thee with accidental poetry. Splendid start. All we've never said won't matter much when we spill out the glory in our hearts. Now I've been around enough to see all the best things in life cost money. Maybe not her love for me, and accidental poetry. So here's the girl who's always late. When she arrives, it's worth the wait. At the altar, can it be accidental poetry?
That was accidental poetry. Like I said, I think it's my favorite song from the album, and I feel like you kind of are also drawn to this one, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm proud of that one.
Now, we spoke about the kind of notion of accidental poetry being even like a little underlying sort of message in your stuff, but I want to ask about something else. Like we mentioned earlier, you have a connection to your area, be it with the opening day, which is a part of the Yankees ritual, apparently, which is kind of crazy, by the way. You have diner, which I have been made aware that there is a very specific diner culture in Jersey. So I need to know more about this in general. Your music, and why is there such a definitive, distinct New York, New Jersey sort of attitude? And does that make its way through in your work? Because clearly you have a song about a diner and about opening day. So the answer is yes, but I want this in your words.
Sure. Well, I'm a product of where I grew up and what I love. And the New York, I had I'm an underdog oriented kind of person, which, living around here, if you're really truly for the underdog, you're a Mets fan. You're not a Yankees fan. The Yankees are the evil empire. But when I was a young man, my parents had a shaky marriage, and I was very drawn to my maternal grandparents. And my grandfather was a huge Yankee fan. My dad was a Red Sox fan. And this was in the late 70s, early 80s, when they weren't just rivals. Like there would need to be police intervention when there'd be Yankee Red Sox games. People would be thrown over the frickin' upper deck, and it was a different time. And so as a sort of protest, because of my parents' rocky marriage and my affinity for my grandpa and his love for the Yankees, I would cleave to the New York Yankees, and there'd be a feeling every opening day. I really, really cared. And this feeling of, well, if we win, we're in first tonight. and the feeling of opening day, of a new beginning, like the bad that's going to happen with hamstring pulls and calls on who comes out from the bullpen. All that stuff hasn't happened yet. And it's this feeling of promise and like the springtime, and so that just reverberated through my life. So opening, and what happened with that song was, it was after college, and I was on vacation with some of my roommates and playing my guitar, and I didn't have that many good songs under my belt, but one of my buddies challenged me, write a song about the happiest day of your life. So simple. And I thought, well, I don't have one happiest day, but I've been the happiest on opening day when the Yankees win. So I wrote that, and Diner's a natural thing. I mean, I wrote, it's kind of like Sal's Place. It's a product of where it is. And in my case, I grew up in East Brunswick, an upper middle class kid in Middlesex County in central New Jersey. And all of our diners were 24-hour diners. So that's just where you'd end up. And then as I bounced around in life, I went off, I went to college in New Jersey. I went to law school in DC, but I came back here, and everywhere I lived, there'd be a 24-hour diner. And it's just where you go for, no, you don't have to dress up. You can be a slob. And, if you get to know people who work there, it's a part of your life. You become a regular. So they've been the center of my existence for various chapters in my life. So that's actually a partially autobiographical song, because I sing about my young divorce. I was married and divorced in my 20s, and just meeting different people and having different home-based diners wherever I went. So yeah, the Jersey is strong in me, I guess.
And as I feel like it should be, it's definitely shaped you. And I feel like I've grown to appreciate the passion that people have for Jersey when they're from Jersey. But as our time here draws to a close, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the show and for telling us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your music, and for putting us on to so much of importance, such as diners and accidental poetry.
I really appreciate you asking these questions and being curious about it, because it's an extra gift when people give a crap about it. So thank you.
Of course, of course. Do you have any final closing remarks, statements, advice, reflection, shout outs, anything at all?
Thank you for listening this far, dear listener. I really appreciate it. We live in the era of the diminished attention span. And for anybody to listen for more than a few minutes to a podcast is very, very impressive. And there's a big payoff for that. So thank you. Support independent music, support Carly, and anybody who supports independent music. I was a college DJ too. And I did a show trying to feature local bands. And I got a lot of pushback from my fellow students who were DJs, because they felt that if it's from the area, it's not cool. We're here to promote the latest band out of Athens, Georgia, or, Britpop. It has to be somebody who's suffering somewhere far away. And that's not true. There's great artistry right around you, and you should support what's local to you, because it strengthens the fabric of your community too. And I appreciate you, Carly, pitching into that effort.
Of course. You never know who's next. And I'm always going to be the person to take the gamble on someone that, is willing to even have a conversation like this. But I definitely agree with that mindset. And once again, thank you so much for sharing with us. And I hope we hear more from you in the future. For Podcast with a K, I'm your host, Carla with a K, signing off. Whether you're listening on WECS 90.1 FM, Twitch, YouTube, Spotify, etc., you know the drill. Or even if this is a clip on social media, if I remember to edit it. But alas, let's close out with one more song from you. So tell us what we're listening to as we say goodbye.
I think we should do Diner. Finish strong with the Jersey sensibility. This is Diner about diners in New Jersey. Hope you enjoy it.
All right, here's Diners. Here's Diner about diners in New Jersey. Have a fantastic week.
to me at 3 a.m., slap a menu on my table. What can I do you for today? This was my favorite place when I was young and able. How many years ago, I will not say. Coffee ground from Mozambique, bacon from the finest freezer. I'm greasy and my nerves are fried for miles. She's heard it all before, well now she's gonna hear once more how she could light this city with her smile. I wanna read her leaves of grass, tell her about that backstage pass when I met the Stones in '75. But poetry won't pay the bills, and Anne Berlin is less than thrilled. So I'll move on and leave her with a vibe. In '86 I sat right there, writing love letters to someone who gave me her address when she was drunk. I think she kissed the drummer. The memory's kinda hazy, but in the morning light my dreams would not be sunk. I wanna read her leaves of grass, tell her about that backstage pass when I met Spandau Ballet in '85. But dropping names did not impress, and Angela could not care less. So this boy lost, but he learned how to strive. '99, after my divorce, I was hawking hardware far off course, looking for a lighthouse lost at sea. Stumbled in on a dark sad night, hankering to share my plight. That's when sweet Nicole slid up to me.
I think I know you. I was 6. My mom worked here in '86. We had your name and number on the fridge.
Oh yes, I said I do recall. In a corner booth I was enthralled. I drove her home across a slippery bridge. I wanna read her leaves of grass, tell her about that backstage pass when I met NSYNC in '95. But that mixtape did not get played, and sadly I did not get laid away for sale. But this boy's hope survived. So step to me at 3 a.m., sit down if you're able. I wanna hear your tribulations and your trials. You've heard it all before, now you're gonna hear once more. You could light this city with your smile.